Okay, thank you everybody for putting that together. Hey, we're moving on practically to the end of the agenda. And it is not a small part of the conversation. First, I would like to introduce Michael Rivers from Salt Property, close to us in Melbourne, from various activities that she's been involved in with us. She specializes in bringing diverse groups and community members together to articulate ideas and dreams and to help focus on the goals and action steps. And as we begin our work today with Michael, I want to turn your attention to the housing project record. We've already done considerable work to determine the needed changes, and now we can take a step back to develop an overarching vision for this work, which will help us determine if anything is missing from the list and determine which issues we need to prioritize. And so without further ado, Michael, you have the floor. Can you get that far? Is that more close? Don't.
It's electronically locked open. Sorry.
Security's coming. All right, thank you. That was exciting. It's got a little bit of excitement back there. Well, so the purpose of our afternoon, our activity is going to be very movement-based. So don't get too comfortable in your seats. It's always hard on a Friday afternoon to get through an activity, but you're going to be moving a lot. The purpose is to understand in advance of the summit, the coming summit, what kind of issues we want to focus on and prioritize them. So we're going to go through a process to find consensus around what the policy buckets are, and then understand where this group would like to focus. And so on the screen, what you see is a prompt, and we're going to kind of talk through that. So I want you to imagine, and I know this can be hard to imagine after you've been talking about different issues and levers and opportunities and barriers, but imagine that we're 10 years in the future, and for some of you maybe it's past to be 20. And we have finally gotten our place, our community to have ample quality housing for all members of the community. So we have different types of housing, different types of density, housing for all income levels, and there are no more barriers associated with housing. So just kind of sit in that space as we go through this. What we're going to get to by the end of the day, hopefully, is what 3 to 5 policy issues must the Assembly, administration, and community address to make that happen. What are the biggest priority issues that they can address? We sent out a survey of that, and we've gotten 21 responses, and that's wonderful, but we want to gather a bunch of data from you today as well. And what we're going to do is take that data and find some of the themes, and then we're going to apply that into an action plan that you'll complete with more community members at the summit. But we brought some of those planning tools that we're going to show you. We might, if we have enough time, we might get into the beginning, so we'll see. So let's just take a minute and talk about some of the things. I heard Andre Spinell and I went to school together, so we were catching up, and I told him what we're going to do, and he said he had talked in your previous day about many issues that, policy issues that exist currently that are barriers or that we need to remove. But let's hear some of them from the audience and from the participants. Yeah, like some of the things that came out of the survey is that there aren't mechanisms for higher density, right? Or there's a huge financial development gap. Or there are issues with Title 21 that make permitting complex or design complex. What other kinds of things, maybe those of you that filled out the survey can kind of have a point on them?
Well, I was just talking about how, I think it's gonna take a whole city shift of residents. I know in my community, they'll lose their minds if we talk about limiting lot size and driveway and all kinds of like their large single-family homes, like 10,000 square feet footprint, and they're scared high rent. So we have to sell, make sure the community understands the challenges of the city and help get the community buying into it as well. That's fabulous.
I'll just, I think, in general, our houses are too big. We require too much space per person. And I think the younger generation is starting to break that trend a little bit.
That's great.
Michael, I have two.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got it going out over YouTube, are they gonna hear me, or do I need?
Yes.
On American.
You're right there,
Come on down.
okay. Come on down. Two issues. One is that I've not heard discussed is what we call our offices, the sins of the 70s and the sins of the 80s, which was basically unbridled sprawl, which has led to, this hodgepodge and incredible horizontal city for a city of our population. And we've also, in combination with that, have a significant aged population of housing in the city that is significantly old, pre-1960s, 2x4 construction, even with energy efficiency upgrades, highly inefficient and expensive for property owners to own. And so there should be a look at the idea of how do we redevelop to deal in a way that is appropriate so that it's an arm's length process between developers and property owners, where they have to find willing property owners to take advantage of it, to start to acquire and accumulate properties for forgiving demolition, redevelopment, and then the idea of replatting and making more efficient and denser property developments in those areas. Again, I'm not talking about eminent domain. I saw eyebrows arch in the room. It's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is policies that give developers the capabilities of offering perhaps slight premiums above and beyond market value property owners to allow them to take into consideration whether or not it's a good time for them to sell to those developers. But with that comes the policy issue of what do you do with the waste stream? Because if you're talking about demolition, that's a fairly significant input into the landfills, which is not cheap. And so what are we going to do with repurposing, salvage, things along those lines? Other communities are doing this in the United States. It's not something brand new that's never been done before. And it is a way for communities with these types of issues where you've got, this hodgepodge of a 5-acre lot here, 6,000 square foot right next door to it. What do you do to bring some rational process to those types of properties? And how do you look at that? And I would say that we can learn from other communities on that as to how they dealt with those issues. Because we're land poor in the Anchorage Bowl. And if you want to come up, more opportunities for development, if you're talking getting up to 700, 800 units of housing per year, 1,000 units of housing, 2,000 units of housing was mentioned earlier, where are you going to build? And then the second issue is going rural. It was mentioned earlier, Senator Salt mentioned that. I think we do need to recognize that there is a part of the population that is growing that has no interest in the accumulation of things or properties that require significant upkeep. This is a newer trend in younger generations, Gen Z, younger millennials. They're more interested in life experience. They don't want to be anchored down by a significant obligation that is a house, single family home, all the things that come with that. And they're looking more for, it's not going to be the majority of our city. Every time I bring this up, I get accused of saying we're going to urbanize Anchorage and make it look like downtown New York. No, that's not. Maybe in a small part of downtown. But, as far as the vertical side, but not across the city. But it's still, 3 stories, 4 stories in different parts of the community, walkable neighborhoods, mixed use districts, retail on bottom. How do we make that something that, has its opportunities in the community also?
Right. Thank you.
And I'll stop there.
Who else? What other kinds of things do we need to be thinking of? Okay.
Yeah, so I think if we're thinking of 3 to 5 policy issues we must address, is that we just need to make the commitment to more housing, like hard stop, like, I think that's the thing. We start talking about the what and the how before we talk about the why. And why do we need more housing? Because we have a housing crisis. And going to make that large policy statement and getting agreement between the Assembly Administration and the community is the first step. Because from there, then you can start to talk about what ways you want to do it, and then we can dive all the way into Title 21 building codes, whether or not we want to do redevelopment in the mechanism of how we want to do it. So I think we need to make sure we have full consensus at the highest level. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it possible to, that statement that you have up there, we have ample quality housing of all types for all members of our community?
Yes, totally. We can adjust that. Go ahead.
So I think that one of the policy issues that we could address is we can take a look at our charter and our code, and we can make amendments so that we can do tax financing as one of the vehicles that we can do, because it's not allowed by charter now. It's that's moving towards moving toward it. And then from a ACDA perspective, one of the policies that we can institute is that, one of the benefits of the authority is we pay use tax on all property we own. If the city was to say during this period of crisis, pass a code or an ordinance that said that for the next 5 years, that lease tax that is paid is refunded, but specifically for the purpose of helping us meet our housing goals, or specifically for the purpose of redevelopment and infill. And then money would go back to ACDA so that we would be able to spend it purposefully on, for example, or the infrastructure. There could be lots of uses for that, but those are 2 things that I would suggest that could be done. There would be tools that I think we can put to work right away.
All right. Dan?
Thanks. To Bill's comments, I'm one that doesn't think urbanization is a dirty word. I think there's a lot of great things that can come with increased density, at least in targeted areas. Waterloo, we have a 15-minute city, we get to all your essential services. Potential for things like protected bike lanes. So I appreciate the comments that, we need to rethink our pattern of urban sprawl. I think we're really needs to get community buy-in, and the reason making sure that this conversation is also community-led is considering the voices of folks. We have our community council system, right? And I think community councils are awesome. They are one vehicle for public participation and direct democracy. And a lot of our community councils work very hard and do a great job of crafting their resolutions and getting information out there and making sure that trying to do what they can to make sure that the neighbors are aware of various issues. I will say, I think some of our community councils are not fully reflective of a wider demographic of the neighborhoods that they represent. I think we all be able to identify the typical demographic of a community council. So one thing we need to be mindful is how do we bring in other voices? How do we amplify the voices of, there's younger people, or if it's unhoused people, or if it's, one of the things I think about is, what about the voices of someone who can't move into a community council district because they can't afford it, because they're not housing inventory for them? Where's their resolution that comes before the assembly? And so, just want to make sure that as we continue this conversation going forward, we're going to be preparing for our housing summit in the fall, then that is something that we also think really critically about is how are we casting the widest net possible for a community vision of the future of housing in Anchorage.
Thank you, that's excellent.
I wanted to build off what Meg was saying and partially what Daniel was saying. I think it's really important to have a vision of, I think, and Daniel, Foster brought it up, what things are we willing to give up? Are we okay with having less landscaping, or maybe houses that aren't as pretty? And I think that is set a little bit in advance, and then what the rules you want to keep, which ones you're willing to get rid of. And then I think the assembly also needs to have some metrics to use. There could be stuff that everyone in this room agrees is a great idea, and then you go to bring it up, and the community council will start yelling at you, and it's your friends and your campaign supporters. What things are you willing to say, no, I'm willing to take a stand on this and do it even though I'm being yelled at, and what things do you want to, I'm being yelled at, maybe I should step back and rethink it. So I think maybe some of those things need to be decided before you start getting into policy issues and making big decisions.
Hello, I know many of you, I'm Matt Duncan, and I am on the executive board of the Spinard Community Council, and I was chosen to represent like 4 community councils that got here, and Carolyn is my backup, she's helping me do this. So the big thing that we're working on with Spinard that you don't know about is we have a large inventory of condemned housing and dilapidated houses, abandoned housing, and probably more than enough housing to solve your problem. It's dark, and it's just sitting there vacant, and code enforcement has a procedure in place that I find very opaque and kind of not helpful. We go to them and we say, this property has been vacant for 20 years and it's boarded up. And they said, yes, we put it on the registry, it is abandoned property, and nothing ever happens. And I think that's crazy. And there should probably be some effort to write the code in such a manner that that inventory can be used for housing. And I mean, like, fix it up, put a nice house there, sell it at market value. Somebody can make money off of the situation. And the other thing that I want to say is that at the very visceral level, when people come to the Spinard Community Council to talk about the issue of homelessness, we have tears shed pretty regularly because people can't go to the playground that they went to when they were kids. They can't take their kids to those playgrounds because there's needles on the ground, there's trash, there's human waste. They can't, we have, gosh, probably someone here in the room knows the actual number, dollar value, but I expect it's millions of dollars worth of beautiful trails that we like to walk our dogs on. That includes from the Coastal Trail to the Chester Creek Trail to the brand new Fish Creek Trail. And it's not safe for me to walk my dogs on those trails because they could eat something that someone has left there and it could kill them. And so those wonderful resources that we're so proud of are being stolen from us. And the police can't enforce anything because we haven't met the minimum standard of providing emergency shelter for these people. But I think those are follow-on effects of addressing the housing. So I think it's cool that we're going to address the housing, but we've already got it. We just need to change the code in such a manner that encourages people to actually develop that housing and then we need the emergency shelter so that we can enforce the law as it's written, so that people aren't camping in the green spaces. And, I mean, if you have heroin, you should probably get arrested, that's illegal. You know, I mean, as much as we hate to criminalize people who have an addiction problem, they're really making that. And I think that's what we're talking about, right?
I think you're, Mr. Cross, you want, and then we'll go.
Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, the homeless issue that we're dealing with has a separate topic. It doesn't have anything to do with it. It doesn't create a community environment where we all have the clean, safe lives and want to raise the children. You know, it's interesting because I live in my dream home. But that was a dream of about 5 or 6 years ago, because now I'm discovering it's a lot of work. So now I'm like, okay, how do my new dream is to actually have a penthouse apartment in multi-family, so I can travel and pay for itself. Now I'm realizing how easy it's trying to do that. One, I find land and so forth. What is the density? How many goods I drove to 4 units, what does it look like? And now it's just exhausting, right? And so when I look at this, so that people have options, and I look at what does that look like? It's you know, regardless of what your dream is, to be able to live somewhere that's clean, safe, and nice, right? That's what we want. We want clean, we want safe, we want nice, we want to be appropriate. And that requires a variety of housing options. From what I've heard today, what do I see as far as what are the 3 or 5 policy issues that we as a assembly, when we dramatically rethink looking at residential zoning, there's so many subcategories and categories, there's too much gray. And so we get lost in the gray. There's stagnation in the gray because the planning and building department, they don't work well with gray. They work well with specifics, and if it's gray, it doesn't get shut down. We should just be looking at the need for land use, like use. We should really, I've never heard of the idea of a bank for offsite improvements, but we need to take those offsite improvement costs off the price of development. So you don't have to add $350,000 onto a 1 acre development to build 6 units. And we should also think about where our height requirements or limitations are really fitting us and not fitting us, right? Whether it's 35 feet or 2.5 stories, or what does that look like? So that people can build vertical small spaces. And then, of course, you know, it's still slightly over to our Title 23, which is building code. I think building should be triplexes and fourplexes like residential is important. But I want to move past that. If you build 2 fourplexes on one lot, you're going to treat that as commercial. It's 8 units, it's a different standard. But I would like to see it treated like you treat each one of them, like a fourplex, a separate residential property, you do it on one lot. And so we can reduce the cost of commercial construction that way. So if that was my 3 to 5 policies, I think those was going to do it. It would be zoning, land use, offsite improvements, and you know, working within those. So thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyperson Martinez.
Thank you. I don't necessarily, I'm not going to land on particular policy things. I think people have really heard and are hearing them, but I did want to make a few comments in this space. First, just a point of clarification. National Infrastructure Bank was part of the last presidential campaign, and it was part of national conversation, and so there are data, there are organizations, and that is not necessarily a new conversation. I just wanted to flag that was part of public conversations already. But Bill Pop mentioned something earlier, so I wanted to just go back to that. We talked about sprawl, and the way I have a shorthand term of how I imagine the city grew, which was put it over there, or put that over there, and rather than where people were, especially from the heart of downtown. And now we're thinking of just kind of how we uniformly move across the city, but I wanted to just go back to that point about sprawl, because even if we're talking about areas where we want density housing, where they're not going to be in every area and be appropriate, I think we need to have a more holistic approach to understanding the assets associated with the increased units density. So we're talking about transit corridor, we're talking about pedestrian safety, and these are other costs that are associated with the public investments of driving the need, as members also said. Our commitment to housing requires us to have a more holistic approach. And I think that's one of the ways we're likely to deal with early not in my backyardisms, because without a good plan and a holistic understanding of how things work in my backyard, it's difficult to even agree to anything. And so we keep hearing, what about over there, or there's a site over here, but not necessarily the larger public infrastructure that wraps around the community that supports the housing in the first place. I just wanted to flag that. I think that's a really important conversation that we start to have when we talk about where we talk about those other assets that support community at the same time. Thank you.
All right, we have 2 more comments, then we're gonna get a chance to discuss it more. Who are you going to?
I haven't had that myself in the queue, but, for me, 3 to 5 policy issues. I think one of the primary policy issues we have to address, and let's get one, we all have to agree what are our needs, what's our responsibilities, and that is something the administration and the various entities in the community who are asking to be part of this conversation, stand to benefit from, who are party to the process. So really, I would think we have to have a branch of this conversation, which is now is what, and whose job is this. So especially I think that's an important part of this.
Thank you, Amanda. Oh.
Yeah, I guess I'll echo, I really appreciate it.
Sorry.
I appreciate the focus on the community vision and really giving buy-in on that. I think that is really important. I guess the comments I would make, they are not necessarily specific policies. One is that we're Alaska's largest city, and we need to be proud of that and not shy away from it. And we need to also, along those same lines, push back on those who make that sound like a bad thing. Because I know we're denigrated a lot in the state, and I don't think that's appropriate. We also need to decide as a community how we welcome more people to live here and what terms we do that. It is easy to say that we should just shut people out of neighborhoods that are already built, or like George said, put people somewhere else or put things somewhere else. We need to think about what that looks like, and there's many different layers to that. We also need to decide as a community if we want to increase home ownership. Because I think right now there's forces that are much bigger than this city, demographics, economic, wages, all those things that are making home ownership less possible. And so that's what's true in our community right now. It is harder to buy a house than it was 30 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago. And then lastly, in order to do all those things, we have to understand and we have to embrace that all of these things will take substantial change. And I think it's not just sacrifice, it's really just really fundamental changes to the way we do things, the way we interact with our systems, the processes that we have, and how we welcome people to this community. So I think change is hard, and change management is its own profession, its own skill, so we need to think about how to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. One more comment. Anya?
Hi, Crystal Hope from Berkeley. I just want to echo a lot of what people said. I've been making notes about my policies that I would like to see go into effect. Opening up new land is very important, especially for us in Berkeley. There's a lot of public land that's available there that I am in support of it opening up. But we need to implement a percentage of the projects to include affordable or workforce housing on projects that are built on public land. Emphasis on the public land, I believe private land is a separate issue. Policies to utilize small house / tiny homes. We don't think that that's not allowed in zoning right now or code. So something to change that to make it easier to develop. Alternative approaches to funding, and this goes into the infrastructure and offsite improvements. I have a specific example of Berkeley looking at trying to develop South Townsite with offsite improvements cost $5 million before you can get a start on the work of lot. So that's a very big, like, you're trying to say $340,000, it's like nothing compared to the infrastructure that we require in Berkeley to build on this very important parcel. So the other ones are Seattle just created the Public Development Authority, which I believe creates a mechanism for bonding and financing outside of the existing low-income financing tools that are usually used. I think that could tie into the infrastructure big idea. And then creating a revolving fund for developers, I think would be a good idea for the municipality as well. And then also expand mixed-use zoning, and specifically, if multiples moves forward, I would like to see mixed-use zoning being implemented in the Holton neighborhood, because we do have a commercial, allow for commercial land in addition to housing, so this would allow for housing to also be allowed, but also allow for different types of uses. Thank you so much.
All right, so we've heard things that are very, at the vision level about defining what types of housing, and that we're all on board with the changes that need to be made around moving forward, right? At a community level, that we need to do that work. And then we've heard very granular, discussion about even what's holding specific projects back. And we do need both of those levels of thinking in this exercise. So the next exercise is to take some of that conversation, we're gonna get into small groups for a little bit of time, 30 minutes. And we're going to go into 5 small groups, and I'm going to use the assembly members as some of the leads so that you can gravitate towards them and make some small groups of about, maybe 6 to 10 people. And in that small group, I want you to have a discussion, and I want you to come out with those 3 to 5 policy issues, or if you want to remove the word policy, you can put issue if it fits more into that. And you need to come back to me with those 3 to 5 policy issues or more, if you'd like, in order to see what sort of the consensus of this group is. Now, we can curate more answers to that.
Thank you. I want to add a suggestion to the process that since we have 5 new members, it probably breaks down just so. Let's have each of them lead the conversation.
Oh, so neat.
Senior, that's pretty good.
I mean, the group is going to generate this together. The assembly member doesn't have to lead the conversation. I would even say appoint someone else in your group to help facilitate the conversation. I just want to use 5 different people to identify 5 different groups. So new assembly members, if you're willing to do that and stand up in different areas.
I'll stand up for you, Chris.
Yeah. We will come around, so they're just I would like everyone else to come towards one of those assembly member representatives. Don't let the group get bigger than 10 people. You have half an hour, and you come around and choose it to come out with your policies. in the boxes, you can take a thing, because after we hear what each person said, we're gonna have to think about what are the themes that are coming out of this. So you might be Mr. Booth thinking about this way over here, but look in your box. And who is gonna go first? Senator Miles is going to go first, so tell us what you came up with. You can do it with your mind, and then we'll take it into the moderator.
Okay, well, I was blessed with the group to have overachievers. So we had 5, but we tried to consolidate them. And it's probably been a lot of what was mentioned earlier. And then I'll have to forgive my chicken scratch, but we did not make the best secretary. Okay, so I'll start with infrastructure financing, tax incentive financing. We heard from the developers, from builders, from everybody in the industry, really, the amount of offsite costs when it comes to developing new subdivisions. Personally, I worked on a subdivision in Eagle River, as most of you know, I worked in real estate and some development with representing some builders. We've been working on this for 3 years and we're still not done, and several $1 million in offsite costs. Every bit of that money spent is going to be tied back to the individual lot, the individual house that is sold, which is then tied back to the consumer. So we need to work at infrastructure financing. I think Mike mentioned earlier today, or maybe I can't remember who it was, maybe a infrastructure bank, whatever the idea looks like, to help the investment of the community so that you have more houses on the tax roll, additional dollars coming in. Redevelopment and reform of zoning. This is something I know Assemblyman Cross, Lori Wynn, and Meg's been working on, and several others. This is something that needs to happen. So reform zoning, streamlining the process with the building department. This is a huge category, so it includes the building department, reform zoning, reform commercial zoning, update the building codes, incentivize long-term apartments, and providing developers incentives for higher density zoning. So that all kind of comes down to redevelopment. Seeking a federal opportunity zone and destination military expertise zone designation, and this was from Mr. Dole, and I think he left. And I am not an expert in this area, but it is in my district, so I'm going to learn about this. So maybe someone can chime in. I don't know much about this one, so.
So Bob explained it as if it's a designated area, as long as the housing development would benefit the military, or there was a demonstrated need for more military housing, that there were incentives. And we know that base is full, and we know we don't have enough housing. So he said that North Star Borough, I believe, was completely a whole, like, and wholly identified as a zone.
Alaska's fair share on federal dollars for low-income housing. We all know that housing is an issue here. Obviously, that's why we're here today. I'm not completely familiar with this Houston situation that Meg was discussing, but it was something we worked with the federal delegation on to get more dollars brought to Alaska for lower-income folks. Revenue diversification is what I brought up earlier today. The burden of municipal income is on the taxpayers. I mean, property owners. Not even property owners. People who live in the municipality, whether you own a home or rent a home, you're still paying the property taxes. Our property taxes are too high. That is, if it's a third of your monthly mortgage payment, if you're paying $800,000 a month in property taxes, that's unaffordable for a lot of people. So we need to look at other streams of income for the municipality. I would venture to say sales tax. So I know that's not going to be very popular, but it has to happen. It needs to be something to offset property taxes so those prices can come down and be more affordable on a monthly payment basis. Okay.
Thank you. Good job. Okay, Felix, Assemblyman.
Wonderful. All right, so Mike had a variety of discussions. So first, we talked about manufactured housing communities, and which we've talked about a few times here, and the idea of possibly developing a co-op model of manufactured housing communities so that people can not only own the building, but own and have co-ownership of the land. We talked about, some members, this was not my idea, We talked about the idea of maybe some type of task forces or working groups or coalitions to do the work as a community, so that we can take different issues and establish really action in those different issues. We talked about funding, and the one specific idea in funding was the bed tax and the specific portion of the bed tax going to pay off the NINA, shifting that to some type of development fund. We talked about goals and vision, and the idea of setting up some type of goal for density, relying on the land use plan or other various planning documents to help clarify our goals and vision. And then, because I was the reporter, I added a topic here, so I used my power. Setting up some type of, in order to help show our goals and vision, setting up some type of demonstration neighborhood or neighborhoods where we really show what this could look like, what all of these things could look like. And then a couple more, tenant supports. Folks, it was important to fix bureaucratic issues like, I think the specific example that was brought up was Medicaid eligibility. Did I get that right? Oh, great. Really focusing on homelessness prevention as a form of tenant support and making sure that folks, once they are housed, there's proper housing stabilization. And then ensuring that tenants and / renters are at the table during these discussions. And then last, we talked about research, a variety of research needs we have. So first, just helping get a landscape of the need itself in housing, different types of housing. We know that that's done or being done. Looking at investment by density, and trying to get a sense of what types of investments are being made and what that looks like. The more dense you have, what do those investments look like? What community infrastructure investments help to promote density? So public transportation, sidewalks, trails, parks. What types of investments help to promote density? Opportunity cost of not investing in housing and community infrastructure, to include and lost property tax or other revenues because we didn't make those types of investments. And then getting geographic and demographic data of where the investments are going in our community so that we can have a clear map of where investments are happening and where investments are not happening. I think that was everything.
All right, thank you so much. Good job, Ruth. And who's ready to go next?
Who did that? So we had some similar things. What our came up with was 24 land use plan zones. Area plan zones, we already have an adopted document of the process that identifies things like transit corridors, other areas on maps that could be rezoned, zoned. We said some type of mechanism for public funding for projects, whether that's housing or infrastructure or other community amenities, similar to the Oklahoma City MAPS program. And it's something that Bill Hawks has been talking a lot about for a number of years now. Right sizing, reducing right sizing outside improvement requirements for development orders. We said reimagine zoning. Let's keep that one. Having a housing concierge where somebody who is not familiar with the process of wanting to build. The example we brought earlier, if there's someone who inherited property in Sonora, oh, I will afford that, so it's like, so there's going to be like this. Where do they have a resource to go to kind of get their questions answered and absolutely kind of shepherd that along the process and the long process? We said improve the PUD process. We similarly said tying density to amenities and infrastructure investment. I think that's really important. So I think interesting. You know, when we think about the context of where quality infrastructure investment has been in our city historically, you know, there has been some disparities, some inequities, right? And I think you really see that in my district, North Anchorage. You know, we have neighborhoods that have traditional edge curbs, nice level sidewalks, and alley access requirements. And then we have neighborhoods in my district that are well hodgepodge, and we have rural curbs, and less model infrastructure. So, and that's where I, when I said earlier, I don't think urbanization has to be dirty, or that means we can actually tie into to some improvements in quality of life. Let's see, incentivize the redevelopment of vacant or abandoned properties. So that's kind of a carrot, and then we also have the stick of disincentivizing land speculation. We talk about the concept of a land value tax, where you adjust the scales of property tax. You know, get your green card in the mail. Your property tax will have the land component and the building component. Right now, the way that our property tax is weighted sort of disincentivizes you from improving your property. The second you go up on it, your taxes go up, right? And so we see that a lot in downtown with some of the service area parking lots. Folks just, you know, even in the past decade, there's been buildings that have been torn down, replaced with service parking, and then the taxes are very minimal on that. Folks hold on to that, our state folks even are holding on to that property, just letting it sit there, everything around it is being improved. So how can we shift the balance of our property tax to not disincentivize improvement of property? So land value tax. And then we have one more part, I don't really, there's a lot going on with this, more by right. Maybe Tyler wants to speak to this.
I didn't remember yet. More by right development for residential development. So less entitlement processes.
Wonderful, good job.
Hey, this is Anna and a good group, and so I did flag a few areas of overlap, so I will go quick. We had 5 things, and then we had what I wrote down as stretch goals. They know that's what stretch goals. So we had encourage, incentivize, remove barriers to adaptive reuse and refurbishing buildings, especially looking at the building code. So we have some good examples from other cities that have proactively made that easier. We talked about, like, it's come up before, basically not requiring somebody to upgrade everything to current code if you're trying to use a building that already exists. That's the reason why we have so many buildings just sitting there, languishing. So that's one of them. Another one is automatic and preemptive upzones or rezones of property by the city, according to the land use plan. So I think that's something to consider. We talked about the downside of that as well, but really saying, you know, it's in the plan, it should happen. We talked also a lot about affordability, and one idea is to basically for new subdivisions or developments, and we put on public land, look at having a certain percentage of affordable, meaning price or income restricted units or lots for those new subdivisions. Again, maybe the person from Girdwood talking about that, but I think it's a good thing to think about how we build that into our projects. And letting the market rate that's paid for the less profit you would make on those other ones. We talked about the idea of community land trust or cooperative housing, so that was tied to discussions about manufactured housing, mobile home communities, but more generally, how could you equitably let people have smaller units on a lot or shared lots without the issues that we're seeing in places like the Forest Park, mobile home, and Shipyard. I think that is it. And then, of course, we have community land trust models in the city, so we'll just have to scan those. Also, access and extension to water and sewer utilities, especially going from the main to, different lands. That was discussed a lot before. And then, on our stretch goals, again, what number 1 said, anxiety tax, infrastructure housing, it was brought up. And then also requiring a variance for not building to the maximum density. So the idea is if you're building, if you can build a triplex or a fourplex, but you only build a single family home, you need a variance for that. So basically flipping the kind of process on its head. But again, that was under stretch goals. Thanks.
Write those down on the cards. Those are very interesting goals. Okay, the last group is over there. Who's gonna, oh, there you go.
Zach and Michael had some thought ideas. Some of these are familiar, so I'll try to move through those quickly. But one we talked about was no more minimum lot size requirements for specific parts of town. We identified that as a significant barrier to development. Another one that was interesting that I heard before was incentives for single level development. With an aging population, so much of our existing housing stock, including condos and multi-family structures, include stairs and then multiple levels, which is significant quality of life issue for a lot of people as they're getting older. So what can we do to encourage more development that better suits their needs? Another one, and this was not familiar with folks from the CDC meeting the other week, but we talked about generic floor plans for non-professionals looking to build multifamily. And that was something we talked about as a great idea, was rather than having to present a plan for approval, what if we had something like a book of stock plans, and you choose one, and that was already approved. Consider ways to make demolition cheaper. I think this tied into what some of the other groups got to, but there's a lot of housing in and around acres that is of generally poor quality and not really suitable to well redevelopment as the existing structure is, but to actually demo those places is prohibitively expensive for a lot of people. So what can we do to make that more affordable? And then also are there opportunities there to convert waste to energy? This is one I don't know too much about, so I would, if somebody else in the group wants to jump up and speak to it, but talk about activate reinvestment focus areas. I believe this was a program that was in place, but perhaps is on the wayside, and we want to revisit that when close enough. And then also, as the others mentioned, making sure that we have good data and research-driven housing policies.
All right, great job. You're the only group that went with many colors, so we're gonna get those up there. One thing that we are gonna do is we're gonna ask now the audience, because the assembly members did a lot of presenting. We're gonna ask you to go up to the wall and just start to put those into buckets of themes, okay? And the way that this works is that when you are done, you sit down. And you can go up several times and change the themes around if you don't feel like the themes, then they need to be rearranged. But when we're done, we're going to talk through them and decide what is this bucket about. Because what I'd like to do before we leave is to see where priority of this group lies. Now, we've heard we need a bigger community vision, but this is in preparation for a bigger summit, so that's perfect. We have lots of time to find out, get more data, and we have all the survey data as well. But where does this group's priorities lie, okay? So if the fine members of the audience will go up and start to pull those into themes, then you can talk through the themes that you found.
That's exactly why we're good rich now.
All right, it's like we have some things. All right, let's come back together. Peter.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna read this out. If you feel like something needs explanation or you want to write it, you can. The first one, policy and planning, information, or remember. This is where we have the market, of workable units per lot, right-side and off-site improvement requirements, including the PUD process, housing concierge, and generic ordinance. We call all that policy and plan. This one is information services, researching the landscape of need, investment identity, what community infrastructure, investment will help promote density, things like that. Data, and research-driven housing policies, and the task force. Then we have a whole window about money. Right, and this is one of the biggest concerns. So, okay, we have community land trust, manufactured housing community, considering ways to make demolition cheaper, incentivizing single level development, de-incentivizing land speculation, land value tax, variance for not building to maximum density, infrastructure financing, tax incentive financing, access and extension to water and sewer utilities, financing that. Bed tax, shifting the bed tax funding, getting Alaska's fair share of federal dollars, activating the reinvestment focus areas, public funding, projects, and land value tax, federal opportunities.
be all about all the diverse ways we might be able to generate different funding for development. And then zoning, no more minimum lot size requirements, 2040, upload. Reforming zoning and reenacting zoning, more by right, and more automatic or alternative upload. And then generally reducing barriers. Time densities to amenities and infrastructure, redevelopment, identification of diverse uses and incentives, encouraging and incentivizing moving barriers to adaptive use, incentivizing redevelopment, updating building codes for new processes, setting goals for density, geographic data where investment is going in our community, incentivizing long-term apartments and providing developers incentives. So were there any of those that, in any of the categories that felt wrong? Certain funding categories. People have any thoughts on the funding categories? You can come on if you want. It's the biggest one.
I think the two on the right, which are about manufactured housing communities, maybe that's a separate group, and they just happen to be on the same thing.
Okay. And these are what? These are good.
Tools to achieve affordability.
And tools to achieve affordability. Okay. Are there any other big sort of that were out of in the wrong categories?
The cash one could probably be broken down into a couple of pieces, one would be centralized, and the other would be funding.
So I'm gonna interrupt on a procedural basis here. I think as much as it's gonna slow it down, we should have you with the microphone in your hand, and we can figure out how we're at the table. And then people who are speaking should speak into the microphone, otherwise it's lost.
Yeah.
That and where. Sorry.
Well, that's yours. No, we need to hear about these. We need to hone in on what the priorities are, so, tell me more about, we need to break down the funding piece, right?
With how many there are, they're probably broken down into 2 or 3 subsections, one focusing on incentivization, another focusing on funding. So there's a lot of things that are under other groups that have some funding or feasibility aspects.
Yeah, good. Okay, this is gonna give a word. What other thoughts though, were coming up? I saw someone's hand go up. Do you have any? No other thoughts? We're good with these groups besides kind of breaking it up, and we're gonna get more input. But any other thoughts of some of those groupings?
I was just thinking that community,
Yeah.
the community land trust one could be over the subgroup of money that's given them.
Yeah, perfect.
I was thinking maybe that community land trust on the far right would be moved over in your other infrastructure financing. Right over to the last one here.
Yeah.
Okay, any other big ones that people have issues with?
So I'll do that.
I agree.
So I think there is incentivizing, I actually think incentivizing land speculation, that could be more policy versus running.
Okay, so we might need to.
I'll deal with that, talk to it.
Okay, so there seems to be one more category. I know this is challenging, I think, crazy around with the microphones on the table, but what I'd like you to do is just take a minute to go up there and look around and think about what you think is the most important category, okay? We just want to get sort of the temperature in the room, then we're going to talk about the processes moving forward. And so in order to do that, we're going to put some markers up there. Just go ahead and mark on the naming card that was created and tell us from your perspective what's the most important category to move forward first. All right? So come on up.
Hey, everybody. Michael, let's go back to the table. Come on back, everybody. I have your vote. Mr. Bob. Mr. Wilson. George. Zach. You guys, hello, come on back.
Come on back.
Party is good, Wilson, hey.
All right, I want to hear from some of you why you voted. I only gave you one vote because it means that you have to really think through your priority and what is first for you. So who would be willing to share what they voted for in our imperfect method with no mics and things like that? But give us why you voted for what you voted for and a little bit of what you were thinking through. And I pre-primed this by asking someone to start us off. Right? Why did you vote for what you voted for?
Thank you very much. So it was really tough because I was going to vote for policy because I really believe that policy and process is sort of the first part of that. But in the end, I gave my vote to dollars. And the reason I gave my vote to dollars is because where our wallet is where our heart is for most of us. And if we could get the dollar commitment to either fund infrastructure or redevelopment or whatever it is we need to accomplish in order for our success, I think that is a really good difference.
All right, thank you. How about someone else?
Yeah, this is Anna. I voted for reducing barriers, and I was torn on that one because really, a lot of what we talked about met the every category, right? So on the one hand, it's very general. On the other hand, I know, especially in this room and folks who are not in this room, there's a lot of people who are really just trying to do the work, and then they're identifying really specific things or really raw things that are getting in the way. And so I think in terms of prioritizing, letting that happen, and then not to say the other things aren't important, but that seems like a good place to start. And some of the things that I was thinking about in terms of process barriers, I think also fall under there as well as policy barriers.
All right, who else would be willing to talk what they voted for? Amanda.
I was torn between zoning and reducing barriers, but I went team reducing barriers in the end because I think that very much to what some of the broad is saying is how do you just make it easy for folks who want to do this stuff to do this stuff. And I also think too, there's maybe some value in having a conversation about some of these requirements and if things can still hold true. It's very fascinating that what Tyler was saying about the landscape, and I think about this all the time. And you have me, personally, I am a single family homeowner, and I am profoundly unhappy. I would be a better condo or townhouse person, and I like the landscaping element and all those things just was like most of my suffering. Then like, if we allowed to reduce some of these requirements, you provide more choice, because there are people who want the shrubs, but there are people who don't want the shrubs. And if you sort of leave up to market demands, you might just get more choice. Thank you. TJ?
Yeah, if we only have a vote for one, I brought a couple of things, it was zoning and streamline zoning, but the most important one that I thought was what I shared with our group, and that was Alaska Natives' fair share of federal funding for low-income housing. So, we're experiencing homelessness in our community, and I want to thank all my fellow Alaskans for being here, taking the time to come here, and the Center for hosting this event, and we're coming together as a community to help solve some things. And I want to encourage everyone, if you get a chance, to email our congressman and let them know that Alaska is not saving their fair share of federal funding for low-income housing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who else is willing to share their vote?
Hi, Christine Bedell. The reason why I chose funding is two things. Because we had this gap funding group for the downtown planning process, and everything that I heard from developers who we actually interviewed and then brought their case to this gap funding group to talk about. So hearing what they were saying about how to make the project pencil. And then the second thing is an example of my son-in-law who tried to build a fourplex. He did build it, but along the way, he was hit with a phenomenal cost for utility connection. He was hit for like close to a $50,000 stormwater thing that he had to improve on his property or put on his property. And then he also had to improve an alley that had all kinds of encroachments in it, including from the muni. And he wasn't gonna be able to go out and tell these people, move your fence, and muni move, your light pole and stuff like that. So he had to pay, I don't know what it was, another $35,000 for painting in an alley that, oh, by the way, dropped off into dirt right after that and caused all kinds of issues. So put his project close to $135,000 or whatever over budget, and he was using part of his retirement to help build this fourplex, and to me, it's a money issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else willing to share their vote? What or why you voted for what you voted for?
So I put a check next to incentives, and mostly I was thinking on the infrastructure side, it remains a huge deal. What I really want to call that category is removing the disincentives, because that's really what we're asking for. We're not even, there are other incentives in there that are legit when it comes to infrastructure and the requirement to build it. It's a big issue that won't go away.
All right. Any final thoughts on what you voted for? Anyone that we've heard a lot from funding, we've heard a lot from some of the other groups, the various group, any of the other groups? All right. Okay, so as we close out this process, Amanda would like to get people who are interested in engaging on a little bit more about each of these issues. Go ahead.
Thanks, I'll speak to that briefly. So we're wrapping up here soon, like we've done, I had mentioned, we got a common time the weekend. And we have covered a ton of ground today. And there's more here that the individual could work out. And my notes here saying, what can we do to keep you engaged? But I don't like that. I need to flip that. What I need to know is, over the summer, as we move towards the summit, what are you willing to work on as members of this community, members of this effort? And so, upon this board and these buckets, we have tasks that are probably going to generate over the summer. And so what I'm looking for is for you to commit to some summertime side work as we prepare for the summit.
All right. So you're asking people before they leave to sign up to commit to summertime work.
And it's not going to be word talking, it's not, it's how do we carry this message to the conclusion of the fall summit, and where are you going with this time? I am in a time in my career now where it's no longer about what grade it is we have, it's what we want to do. And so we don't need to do that stuff. And I keep saying I'm out of my position.
I mean,
You're here. Maybe we go outside.
All right, go ahead. You want to go to the line?
Yeah, I think it would just help some of us if we could understand a little bit more what is the summit. And so this is a retreat, and there's going to be a fall summit, and what should we expect the outcome of the summit to be? I think it will help frame the work that goes into it as well.
Yeah, and we definitely had that conversation earlier today, what should we be focusing on? And I'm just one person here, but for my part, today was the follow-on of our conversation we had last fall. And all of it is in preparation to get to the point where the summit will produce direct and actionable legislative and community-driven efforts that are specific and concrete. And so today we went through this process and identified a series of areas, buckets of policy proposals that are germs, need to sprout and grow. And so the idea over the summer, this work we're talking about, Sunday Court, is to be part of the conversation about what does this mean as we head towards the summer? What do we need to do? What's the topic? How do we frame this? And then it could be in August that group is the one who leads that conversation with the whole on those topic areas because you spend a little time thinking about it. And all of this is in development. And so, again, we could have gone to one of those beautiful, large format documents that take you right through action. But we wanted to make sure today it was more contemplative and limited than driving towards the goal. So when we do get that part, we're fully involved.
I would just add as well, with permission of the chair, that we can drive towards the summit, but nothing stops us from identifying action steps we can take in the meantime, right? So if you commit to this and you and your group and you and the assembly member and they want to introduce legislation to move the ball forward, why not? So I think that's a really important thing to remember is that the summit is, a way to start to, I believe, capture what's in motion and what's likely to keep moving, but nothing prevents that momentum from continuing forward now.
All right, before I turn it back over to the chair to sort of close this out, the other question I didn't ask you to contemplate is between now and the summit, we have some information, right? Now we have some buckets, and we have some idea of priority. This is a very small group, and we probably need to ask more people. And so as you leave, we would love for you to also, think about who else needs to be asked the same question from what perspective. We heard earlier community councils, we've heard people that don't go to community councils, right? So we need to think about who else we can get engaged beyond this group. So your help with that would be fabulous as well. All right, and I'll turn it back over to you.
And Sandra was to the board, so I told the board that this meeting, some people sign up to say, this is important to me. Important enough to spend a little bit of time Okay, so I think I have to say thank you, everybody. This was quite a long and intense day. It's been an amazing array of inputs and conversation, very broad ranging. You know, we had conversations ongoing recently where we're going to be discussing work at our rules committee. We have a triplex and fourplex conversation where we present to the agenda. There's a lot of proposals there. We are working on a survey. We're going to have a fall effort. And tonight, for those of you who have time from 5:30 to 7, there's going to be an informal social gathering wrap-up at King Street Brewery just up the road. And other than that, I think we're going to have any last word comments. I think we'll, Christina.
I would just like to thank Amanda and the team for today. I think they did just a phenomenal job. They need that.
We now have our weekend back as it comes on board. Yeah, if everyone doesn't mind, help us to stack the chairs and we put it away the tables. So we are actually, we are